You're listening to How to Win with Mike Moore, the podcast that provides you with practical insights on how to win in every arena of life.
Hello, I'm Mike Moore, and welcome to the How to Win podcast. These podcasts are based off 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14, and it says that we always triumph. Now, this is a new edition of How to Win, and I'm calling it Just a Thought. Just a Thought. A few years ago, began to record thoughts that God gave me, put it in my thought journal, and then I would post the thoughts. But I always felt that I could have gone a little deeper if I had a different format. So when we decided to change the way we were doing our podcast and to add new editions, I thought I'll just try this Just a Thought out on you. So each episode, I'm taking a thought and then we're expanding on the thought. These are thoughts from my thought journal. And our thought for today is growth can only take place outside of your comfort zone. I'll read that again. Growth can only take place outside of your comfort zone. You know, this thought really emphasizes, and we could say it maybe even better, that your greatest growth is not going to take place where you're comfortable. Your greatest growth is going to take place when you stretch yourself and you get outside of your comfort zone. Now, the key word in this thought, is comfort zone. And so when I think of a comfort zone, I think of several things. I think of a state of mind. I think of the word safe. I think of the word secure. I think of the word confident. I think of the word routine. I think of the word comfort zone, routine. I think of tradition, custom. So when I think of comfort zone, I think of it being a place where I feel secure and I feel confident. It's what I normally do. It's a routine. It's my custom. It's traditional. But there's one word that I think of that brings all these other words together, and that's the word familiar. Familiar. So it can be a place. My comfort zone can be a place. My comfort zone can be a position. My comfort zone can be a relationship. For example, my wife and I like to travel. You know, we like to cruise and we like to go to different countries, and we thoroughly enjoy it. Most people, including myself, our comfort zone is home. It's the place where we feel the most secure. It's the place where we're very confident. It's the place where it's very familiar. And even though we like to travel, whenever we go to a place, a country that speaks another language, we've never been there before, our comfort zone goes down. It goes down not because it's not a great place. It goes down because we're not familiar with that place. We don't feel as secure as we would driving to the mall here or driving to the grocery store here when we're in a foreign place and we don't know where everything is. We don't know neighborhoods or anything. Just going out, catching the train or bus can be a little uncomfortable because it's not familiar to us. Most people operate in the familiar. Most people operate in that place that we call comfort zone. And there's some advantages to operating in your comfort zone, because if it's your routine, if it's something that you do all the time, then you can develop your expertise at that. You can become competent at that. Your anxiety level is going to be lower in your comfort zone. You're going to experience less risk in your comfort zone. You know, and you don't have to think as hard, you know what I mean? For me, I don't have to pray as hard if I'm in my comfort zone. But in the same way that there are some advantages, some pros to being in your comfort zone, there are also some cons, some negatives to staying in your comfort zone. There are some negatives. I want to read a text from the Bible that I wrote down. It's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. And I want to read it to you from the Message Bible. It says, by an act of faith, Abraham said yes to God's call to travel to an unknown place that would become his home. When he left, he had no idea where he was going. Now, I'm going to reiterate that verse again because it's very powerful and it speaks to this issue of comfort zone. Your greatest growth will take place outside of your comfort zone. So by an act of faith, in other words, Abraham heard a word from God and he said yes to God. God had called him to travel, watch this now, to an unknown place that would become his home. And when he left, he had no idea where he was going. In other words, God was challenging him to move outside of his comfort zone because it was an unknown place. It was a place that would become his home, but it was not familiar to him. And the scripture says that when he left, he didn't know where he was going. In other words, obedience for Abraham required that he leave his comfort zone. I am saying to you that if you're going to really grow, you're going to have to get outside of your comfort zone because there are cons or negative to being in your comfort zone. I pastored for 42 years and pastoring became my comfort zone. I was very comfortable pastoring. I was very comfortable teaching, very comfortable counseling. I was very comfortable standing on stage, talking to a large group of people. That was my comfort zone. And one of the cons to staying there is easy to become complacent. It really is easy to become complacent when you're in your comfort zone. Because you know how to do it. You know what you're doing. You've got a routine in it. There may be some risk, but it's not high risk. You know, over a period of time, if you're not careful, you can easily become complacent. In your comfort zone, you can develop what you know, the skills that you have, but you're not going to develop new skills. You're not going to develop, you're not going to have new experiences. So when I transitioned out of pastoring, God said to me, expect to coach and mentor. Well, that's a whole different place. That was a whole different place than what I was doing. It's a whole different place to coach leaders, mentor leaders. It's a whole different place. There's learning involved. I got to learn how to do that. I've got to learn some things, and it's going to lead me to new experiences. I tell you something that I learned about comfort zone and getting outside of your comfort. There are two things that I learned, and I'll share them with you. It is something about, now listen, there's something about a challenge. Something about something stretching you, pushing you further than you've been before. It's something about the more you have a challenge, the more you are challenged, the more normal that challenge becomes. Think about that. It is possible, and I learned this, I really learned this, that it is possible to expand your comfort zone. It's possible to expand it, grow it. Because once you get outside of your comfort zone, and the more you're challenged in that area, there will come a time where what you was uncomfortable with, it will become your normal. It will become your normal way of doing things. So now you've expanded your comfort zone. And I'll give you an illustration from my life. Now, pastoring was a whole different animal, but let's look at just the speaking part. As a kid, I taught some Sunday school, and as a young adult, I taught a Sunday school class, small Sunday school class. But I had never stood up in front of a large group of people to teach or preach or whatever you want to call it, communicate. So when I first start giving sermons, I was so nervous. I can remember standing there in front of people when I first started giving out sermons. My knees were shaking. I mean, my knees were literally shaking. I mean, and my mouth would get dry. And I hear people say that they were trembling. I literally was trembling. And then my mouth would get white and dry. I was very uncomfortable when I first started preaching. Very, very uncomfortable. It was outside of my comfort zone. And then, but the interesting thing about it is the more I began to preach, what once was outside of my comfort zone became normal for me. So what happened, my comfort zone expanded. You can expand your comfort zone. Another thing happened to me when I first went on television. Okay, I'm comfortable now talking to an in-person crowd of people. I'm comfortable doing that. But now TV presented another challenge for me because now I'm not speaking to an in-person crowd or in-person group. I'm speaking to a camera. And when I first started doing that, it was like, Lord, are people listening to me? Because when you speak to an in-person crowd, there's some, you get the energy of the people, nodding, or the expressions, and there's some energy, there's some mutual energy that's flowing. But when you're talking to a camera, that camera's just sitting up there looking at you. And so it was challenging for me. It was outside of my comfort zone. But the more I spoke to a visual TV audience through a camera, the more comfortable I became, and that was uncomfortable became normal. So now I've expanded my comfort zone. Just recently, in fact, when I first started doing the podcast, that was uncomfortable for me. Now it's my normal. I recently I have a new book out entitled Help My Mind is Under Attack. It's a great book. You ought to get it. It's a biblical approach to good mental health. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. You can go through Mike Moore Ministry, Amazon. You can get the book. It'll be a blessing for you. But I was challenged by a teammate to do an audio book. Well, that was different for me. It was different. Initially, it was very challenging. I had to say it, and then I had to come back, and then say it again, I had to come back. But over the period of time of doing the book, I became more comfortable. I was expanding my comfort zone. The reason why God wanted Abraham to go to an unfamiliar place, to move outside of his comfort zone, it's because he wanted Abraham to expand his comfort zone, but he wanted Abraham to grow in his trust with God, to grow in his trust with God. And when you get outside of your comfort zone, like, for example, when God said, I want you to build this building, 3,000-seat sanctuary, and I want you to do it debt-free, that was outside of my comfort zone. But he wanted me to experience and trust him in a way that in my comfort zone I never would have experienced. And then we built an activity center that cost $26 million. And God did it, you know what I mean? But what happened, it forced me to trust God on a different level. Once you get in your comfort zone, it's easy to not really trust God because you're so familiar with it. But once God pushes you outside of it, it forces you to trust him because you're not comfortable, you're a little nervous, you're not as confident as you are in your comfort zone. You don't always know where you're going and how it's going to happen. Comfort zone, there's a level of control, but once you get outside of your comfort zone, there's no control, and you're not as comfortable. You're a little nervous, and it forces you to learn to trust God, and you will begin to experience God's power in a way that you never experienced before. But there are two things I think that's critical that we have to mention near our finish line, our finish time. We have to talk about risk, and we have to talk about failure. Risk and failure. Risk and failure. Risk is necessary for progress. It's necessary. No one, including myself, have ever experienced any level of success apart from risk. Because once you leave your comfort zone, you enter the risk zone. Risk simply means the possibility or the chance that you may lose, or you may fail, or you may not realize your expectation. There's that possibility. But it's essential to progress. In the Bible, 4 men took their friend who was paralyzed to Jesus. They grabbed a mat, The paralyzed man was on the mat, and 4 of his friends took him to Jesus. But when they got to the house where Jesus was, there was a crowd. And they took that man because they couldn't go through the traditional door, front and back door. They took him up on top of the roof, tore the roof out, and lowered the man down, and the man was healed. Jesus saw the man coming down, saw his faith, and healed the man. But that was risky. It was risky. Progress involves risk because they tore the roof up, but what if the roof had caved in and they all fell down? What if they had dropped the man, lowering him down? What if Jesus had gotten angry at them, interrupting his sermon? What if the owner of the house, and some believe it was Jesus' house, but what if the owner of the house had got angry because they tore up his roof? It was risky what they did. But everything that I have accomplished has involved risk. I was in law school when God called me to minister. I left law school. That was risky. I was pastoring a little church, and God spoke to me about leaving that little church. I didn't know where I was going. It was risky. Everything, every move, everything, even marriage is risky. It's risky. There's a possibility, there's a chance that you may fail. It may fail. There's a chance that you may not get what you expect out of the marriage. It may not be what you thought it may. You see, marriage is risky. Everything is risky. Anything that involves success involves some risk. You got to leave your comfort zone, and you're going to run right into risk. It's risky. I had a thought. See, risk, life is risky, but fear is fatal. You're never going to steal. In baseball, there's a thing called stealing a base. You go from first to second before the catcher can throw you out. Well, you're never going to steal with your foot on first base. In basketball, you're going to miss 100% of the choices you don't shoot. You say, well, I may miss it. Yeah, if you don't shoot, you're definitely going to miss it. But what if you're going to hit it? I want to close out by saying something that's very powerful, and I hope you're getting something out of this. Comfort zone, you got to leave it. Risk, you got to take it. But I think, and this is so important, I think you have to redefine failure. Redefine failure. Redefine it. I pull out a thought from my thought book. I wrote this one time that failure, this is from my thought book, failure has no power over a person who maintains an appetite to learn. Just a thought. Got it out of my thought book. Failure has no power over a person who maintains an appetite to learn. And that's what I learned about. I've learned about people who are successful on a high level. They don't sit around worrying about, I may make a mistake, I may fail, because they don't see failure as a destination. They see failure as an event. It's an event. So they pull the trigger because they believe, now listen carefully, they believe highly successful people who are consistently winning in life, they believe that I'm going to either learn by doing it wrong or I'm going to gain by doing it right. And whatever the way, I'm going to win, because if I do it wrong, I'm going to learn from it. If I do it right, I'm going to gain from it. Henry Ford said something that was very powerful, and I'll close with this. Henry Ford says, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. That's powerful. He said that failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. And what he means by that is you fail, but it's an opportunity to begin again. But because you should learn from your last failure, then you're going to approach it again, but this time you're going to have more intelligence about it. And I've seen that. I've seen that in ministry. I've seen members of my church, couples in my church that get divorced. That's failure. That's coming up short. I've seen them in other marriages. Later on, they got married and they have good marriages. I mean, great marriages. Why? Because failure, according to Henry Ford, is just simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligent. So they look back and they realize the mistakes they made in this one. So when I enter into this one, then I have more intelligence about what not to do and what I should do. That's powerful stuff. But remember, your greatest growth will always be outside of your comfort zone. And don't be afraid of taking a risk. Successful people take a risk. It's necessary. It's necessary for success. But you're not going to fail. In fact, the scripture says, and it's our foundation scripture for how to win, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14, it says, "Now thanks be unto God who always causes us to triumph." I pray that you've gotten blessed by this episode of Just a Thought. Let me know how this new format is doing in your life. On Tuesday, my Tuesday podcast, my daughter and I are taking subjects and we're discussing it. You don't want to miss Tuesday podcast. And then on Thursdays, I'm just sharing a thought with you. Let me know how we're doing. And I pray that you have a great rest of the week.
Are you ready to break free from the chains of anxiety, stress, and depression? Mike Moore, author and founding pastor of Faith Chapel and host of the How to Win podcast, is here with his new book, Help, My Mind is Under Attack. Learn how to overcome attacks on your mind and live an emotionally healthy life. Grab your copy now. Available as ebook on Amazon and paperback on MikeMoore.com. Embark on your journey to complete mental health and emotional peace.